I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli Prime Minister meets one-on-one with the Russian president. A fitness app accidentally leaks critical and classified I.D.F intel. And dust off those telescopes because tomorrow's moon will be a once-in-a-lifetime sight. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu has just met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow to discuss the looming threat of Iran in the region. Iranian forces have become increasingly entrenched in southern Syria, filling the power vacuum left by the Islamic State. And now Netanyahu is warning Putin that Israel will not hesitate to act in order to prevent further Iranian footholds. The two world leaders toured Moscow's Jewish Museum and Tolerance Center, marking the 75th anniversary of the rebellion in the Sobibor concentration camp. For Netanyahu, it was a fitting place to draw historical parallels to the current Iranian threat mounting on Israel's border.
עליית הנאצים ואחר כך תבוסת הנאצים זה שצריך לעמוד מול אידיאולוגיות רצחניות בזמן ובעוצמה. זו המשימה שלנו גם היום. ועל כך אני רוצה לדבר איתך על אזורנו, על המאמצים המשותפים שלנו.
The I.D.F claims to have struck military shipments from Iran to the terror group Hezbollah roughly 100 times last year, often in southern Lebanon and southern Syria. This has sometimes placed Israel at odds with Moscow ever since Putin aligned himself with Syria back in 2015, aiding President Assad's troops during the bloody civil war. Israel's defense minister has warned Iranian weapons could turn Lebanon into one big missile factory right on Israel's front door. But the army has already demonstrated in the past that with or without Putin's permission, Israel will take every possible measure to avoid this nightmarish possibility. While Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is in Moscow meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, a senior Russian delegation is now preparing to come straight to Jerusalem tomorrow. Joining me now in the studio with more on this is Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so the stated intent is to discuss shared interests and concerns in the region. What are Israel's shared interests and concerns with Russia?
Well, I think that the major issue of concern is coordination in the case of military action, because I think the potential for unintended consequences here is enormous. And the fact that the Russians have reacted so swiftly to Netanyahu's visit, I think indicates two things. A, the gravity that they view the situation, and B, the impressive job that Netanyahu is doing in the field of foreign relations. We see he's had tremendous success with Modi in India, good relations with the Trump administration, and now he seems to have the ear of Putin as well.
But there are different interests as well here, right?
There are different interests as well, but I think that Russia certainly doesn't want to give Israel a problem of having no option but to preempt, because once these precision missiles are in place, and if the Arabs use them first, the Arab side or the Muslim side, whether it's Iran or Lebanon or Hezbollah or Syria, there's a grave danger. I mean, a preemptive strike on Israeli air bases could knock out the major portion of the Israeli Air Force. So I don't think this is a situation where Israel cannot allow the other side to acquire the abilities that it seems intent on acquiring.
Right, and we talked earlier about, you know, the footholds in Syria. What action do you think Israel is going to be taking right now to secure its border?
Well, you know, Israel is between a rock and a hard place here, because the kind of action that is called for is certainly the kind of action that will not preserve the peace. I think we're reaping, I said before in one of the earlier interviews, that we're reaping the bitter fruits of two failed policies of appeasement. First of all, the mismanaged war in 2006 with Lebanon, where the Olmert government allowed Hezbollah to emerge intact as a military organization, and the Obama policy towards Iran, which enriched it economically, empowered it militarily, and entrenched it politically. So without those two failed policies, I think the situation would be very different on our northern border. And to bring that back to a manageable situation, I see it very difficult to achieve without massive military action. And I think we're in a very difficult position at the moment.
All right, well, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what comes of the Russian delegation's meeting here in Jerusalem. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Employees of the UN's Refugee Agency for Palestinians in Gaza have just launched an all-out strike, protesting the U.S.'s decision to slash nearly half of its funding to the aid group. The boycott includes Gazan teachers, doctors, social service providers, and aid workers, and they're all urging the United States to consider the humanitarian crisis above politics. Joining me now is ILTV's Shimon Peres with more on this story.
Natasha, yeah, as you said, thousands of aid workers from UNRWA are now protesting in the streets today. They're fighting against what they view as an existential threat both to their organization and to the Palestinian people. And to be honest, no matter what happens following cuts or following the possibility of a dissolvement of UNRWA, it would certainly mean trouble both for the Palestinian people under UNRWA's care and countries that host UNRWA like Jordan and Lebanon.
Now, what do the people of UNRWA want other than the money, of course?
So the money ties into everything. They want the money in order to continue the status quo of UNRWA operations. They want to keep doing what they've been doing, which they've been doing for 70 years. Now, the United States, on the other hand, is saying, you know, you're perpetuating the conflict more than you're helping to solve it, and so put our money where we want you to put it or say goodbye to it.
All right, well, let's check out your report.
نحكي عن حق اللاجئين وحقنا في العودة لن نتنازل عن هذا الحق مهما مرت السنين ومهما مرت الأيام سيبقى حقنا في العودة إلى أراضينا المحتلة مهما كان ومهما حدث لنا للإنوروا ووكالة الأمم المتحدة حق علينا في أن توفر لنا التعليم والصحة.
The White House first announced the massive cuts earlier this month amidst international outrage, even from several Israeli politicians who also say pressure could turn spillover into a dangerous security threat. Though the White House denies the decision is meant to collectively punish the Palestinians for refusing to negotiate with the United States on Mideast peace in the wake of Trump's Jerusalem decision, President Trump himself seemed to contradict those words just last week. At a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister, he told reporters that, quote, that money is on the table and that money is not going to them unless they sit down and negotiate peace, end quote. Meanwhile, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is currently in Jordan, meeting with King Abdullah II. The growing anxiety in Gaza is surely on both of their minds, as well as figuring out a new strategy for the Palestinians moving forward.
Relations between Israel and the Palestinians have been at a grim standstill, but it looks like there's an upcoming meeting on the horizon for the first time since Trump's bombshell Jerusalem speech. The topic on hand is money, since that tends to be what always brings the Israeli finance minister and the Palestinian prime minister together. Finance Minister Kahlon will host PA Prime Minister Hamdallah next week in Jerusalem to discuss economic cooperation. The two actually met back in October and have a reportedly very warm personal relationship. The elephant in the room of peace negotiations is likely to come up, though. America's peace envoy Jason Greenblatt has urged Kahlon to stress the importance of the United States in the peace process. Netanyahu claims Trump's landmark decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the American embassy to Jerusalem will ultimately help facilitate Middle East peace. But with PA President Abbas currently in Jordan and the Palestinians refusing to even discuss the matter with the United States, many wonder if peace is further off than ever before. At least it's a bit of a relief to see that Israel and the PA can still talk shop. Contrary to statements from the president of Rwanda, Israel's interior minister now says a third-party country has agreed to accept African asylum seekers that are deported from Israel, even if they were deported forcibly against their will. This statement from Interior Minister Ali Adeli has already ignited a whole new debate on the government's controversial plan to deport nearly 40,000 African asylum seekers beginning in April. The government has branded them as illegal infiltrators, but the majority, mostly Christians from Eritrea and Sudan, say they escaped genocide, war, and indefinite service in a slave army as refugees for a better life here in Israel. These populations are almost unanimously accepted as legal refugees worldwide, but to date, Israel has approved less than 1% for refugee status. This is why opposition against the deportations has been furiously ramping up throughout the country, and it's also why Israeli police say they're now preparing to use force when the deportations begin. The government is now offering a $9,000 bonus to ordinary Israeli citizens with security backgrounds to help physically enforce the deportations. But with doctors, rabbis, former diplomats, and even Holocaust survivors urging the government to halt the plan, even Israeli leaders are beginning to express doubts. The top official in charge of organizing the deportations has just confessed that he considers quitting his post, quote, every day. Now, despite worldwide efforts to commemorate the horrific lessons of the Holocaust, many worry that as generations pass, those lessons are being lost to time. That's why Israel's ambassador to Germany has just arrived in Berlin to help open a new exhibition in memory of the heroic diplomats who risked their lives to protect Jews during Hitler's final solution.
It is in this spirit that I think the opening of this exhibition today regarding diplomats recognized as righteous amongst nations, conceived by Yad Vashem, fulfills a vital role. If there are elements of the Holocaust that can never really be fathomed, these stories around us of courageous diplomats that saved so many thousands of Jews can be understood, admired, and must never be forgotten.
Germany's foreign minister was also on hand to open the exhibit called Beyond Duty, which is located in the heart of Germany's Foreign Office building. The importance of preserving Holocaust history has become more critical than ever, especially with the reported rise of anti-Semitism throughout the West, as well as Poland's controversial new Holocaust bill, which makes it illegal to refer to Nazi concentration camps in Poland, including Auschwitz, as Polish death camps. In a tragic illustration of this urgency, the world has just lost two very well-known Holocaust survivors. Heinz Jakob Koko Schumann, who was a famous Berlin jazz musician before the Nazis sent him to Auschwitz, has just passed away at age 93. And Arkady Weisspapir, who was the last known surviving fighter of the Jewish uprising in the Sobibor concentration camp, has sadly also just passed away. He was 96. Their stories, their lessons, their memory will continue to remind the world never to forget. Well, it's Space Week in Israel, and some of the world's top scientists, experts, and astronauts are coming together to discuss the future of space research. But one of the biggest limitations to exploring the universe actually happens to be an issue we are warned about on a daily basis: radiation. No, not from our cell phones, but from the great beyond. Joining us now in the studio is Oren Milstein, the CEO of STEMRAD, an Israeli company that may have a solution. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's talk about the issue of radiation for those of us who need this to be broken down simply. How does radiation affect space travel?
So radiation is a big bottleneck in getting people into deep space for the first time since the Apollo missions. And the problem is either solar storms coming from the sun or galactic cosmic rays coming from faraway galaxies. And when they converge, they cause, unfortunately, cancer. Over high doses of radiation, an astronaut could unfortunately experience cancer down the road over his career.
Wow. Okay. So what is the solution that your company has come up with?
So we basically map the most sensitive tissues within the human body when it comes to radiation. And we found a way to protect those tissues specifically using a very ergonomic vest called the AstroRad Radiation Vest. It's been co-developed with Lockheed Martin in America. Wow. And it's being sponsored by the Israeli Space Agency, and it's about to be deployed around the moon in 2019 on Orion's mission, NASA's flagship spacecraft.
Now this is amazing. I'm wondering if there's something like this that we can wear to protect ourselves from just, our cell phones and X-ray machines and so on and so forth.
It's interesting that you ask, because we do have a ground-based solution being used by our firefighters and soldiers as we speak to safeguard our nuclear reactors around the world.
Very cool. Okay, so this kind of may be a very straightforward question. Why did you decide to focus on this issue? But I think it does have some implications when we think about the Israeli astronaut Ilan Ramon as an example, right?
Yeah, Ilan Ramon, certainly, I knew him actually. I played basketball with him
on
the base in Chatzirim as a young man. And his tragedy inspired me, for sure, to look for a solution. But it all began in my studies, in my PhD studies in the Weizmann Institute. That's where I was truly inspired to protect human beings from harmful radiation, be it gamma radiation or spaceborne radiation.
Well, I mean, I think what you guys are doing is absolutely incredible. We have to remember how important it is for us to continue doing, manned research in space as well, a topic which I wish we had time to discuss, but we just don't. Thank you so much for joining us, Oren.
Thank you for having me.
All right. The Israeli army obviously keeps an extremely tight lid on all kinds of its intelligence and sensitive data, but once in a while, sometimes purely by accident, slip-ups can happen. Not that we're confirming nor denying anything, of course. It just turns out the IDF is clamping down on not one, but 2 alleged security leaks this week. The first case involves IDF soldiers who used a popular fitness app called Strava. Users typically use this app to track their athletic workouts, creating a live GPS map of their heat signatures. The problem is, IDF soldiers using the app accidentally revealed the location of military bases, guard routes, and even possibly classified army projects in the process. But the Defense Ministry is finding this second slip-up a little harder to figure out. Israeli scientists working for the government published extremely classified data on the internet, apparently because they thought they had been given the go-ahead. The publication was immediately retracted, of course, but experts worry that the intel, which contains classified secrets, may have already been copied elsewhere. Needless to say, the Army has already placed new restrictions in response to these leaks, so it looks like soldiers with smartwatches may want to reconsider before putting on their uniform. All right, guys, the annual Sundance Film Festival is winding down, and one of the most buzzed about films in the lineup is an Israeli documentary called The Oslo Diaries. The film offers a never-before-seen glimpse at what went on behind closed doors in the days leading up to the Oslo Accords between Israel and the Palestinians. The controversial doc features exclusive interviews from many of the major behind-the-scenes players in the Oslo Accords, including the final taped interview of the late Israeli president Shimon Peres, who stood on stage with both Rabin and Arafat during the signing ceremony. Archival footage, woven with shocking new insights from former Israeli negotiators and stylistic reenactments, combined to bring this unseen chapter of Middle East history to life. The film won rave reviews at its Sundance premiere last week, igniting a buying frenzy from distributors. And HBO bought the film for its American release before the festival was even over, and plans to release the film later this year, marking the 25th anniversary of the Oslo Accords. The Israeli directing team of Mor Laushi and Daniel Sivan, along with the film's Israeli producers, have been working tirelessly on this film for years. So I guess it's time to renew those HBO memberships, because we won't have to wait much longer to see the film for ourselves. Well, last year the Caribbean was pounded by deadly hurricanes, and the amazing Israeli rescue and aid team Israel has been on the ground for almost half a year now in Puerto Rico, where thousands still remain homeless. Well, one 11-year-old Israeli girl is taking it upon herself to lend a big helping hand, and you could even score some awesome fashion out of it. Meet Meital Steinthal, an incredible 6th grader here in Israel, putting her love of sewing to some very good use.
My name is Meital Steinthal, and I live in Modi'in. We're helping Puerto Rico. There were 2 Category 5 storms there that destroyed houses and took some lives. A few years ago, I went there with my family to the Caribbean, and I was swimming with surf sharks, and I had a really nice time there, and I had a connection. I make bags, and then I sell them, and the money goes to Israel Aid that they're going to buy water filters and put them in the people's houses so they have water to drink.
Meital calls her campaign, which is already more than halfway to its $4,000 goal, Puerto Tico. Tique is the Hebrew word for bag, by the way. And on top of these awesome handmade bags, Meital is also offering her very own line of handmade pencil cases, baby bibs, and accessories through the crowdsourcing campaign. All of the money is going directly to Israel Aid's life-saving efforts on the ground. There's less than 2 months left to help Meital reach her goal, so if you want to help her out or just land yourself one of these trendy bags, head on over to her campaign on classy.org by searching Puerto Tico. Whether you're doing it for rehabilitation or just plain exercise, balance strengthening hasn't always been the most entertaining activity, at least not until now. Here to tell us more is David Garber, the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at the company Bobo. Thank you so much. I see you have this device of sorts in front of you. What is this? It's a Bobo Pro board?
This is known as the Bobo Pro.
Okay.
It's basically an interactive board that creates feedback for users. Now, if you go into any, I'm a physical therapist by training. Sorry to move this into the camera. Okay. If you go into any physiotherapy clinic, you'll see unstable surfaces such as this. This is a very basic one. Now, when we work with a patient and we want to increase their stability and their proprioception and balance, we typically throw a ball to them and have them stand on it, and it becomes very boring, and there is no objective feedback for them.
Right.
Once we put this board on, every movement that the patient makes or the user makes is fully captured by this Bobo tablet. Okay.
Interesting.
And it's used in physiotherapy clinics. It's used in training centers.
So this is for all different types of rehabilitation, I imagine.
Right. So we generally use it for lower limb rehabilitation, also for balance, also for upper extremity, and also for core strengthening.
Very interesting. How did you come up with this idea?
So I would love to say that I came up with the idea. However, the two founders are also physiotherapists, and they found a need to make this kind of treatment more exciting and more interactive.
Is there any data that you've collected from using this board?
Sure. The Bobo tablet is always collecting data when it's in use.
Right.
We had a clinical trial that was performed at Hadassah Hospital that showed muscle activity being used with the board and without the board. And it shows that the muscles are engaged and are being used.
So it's doing its job. The board is doing its job.
It's definitely doing its job.
So where is it available?
So it's available in Israel. We've sold to obviously the I.D.F. Many of the units are using it in the I.D.F. and many clinics. My clinic as well. I started as a customer and became an employee. We're going to be heading to what's called a Combined Sections meeting in New Orleans in the U.S. We're starting our foray into the U.S. market.
Very interesting.
And we've been into a European Medica show as well.
Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, get your telescopes ready, guys, because tomorrow night is going to be one of the biggest lunar spectacles in our lifetime. For the first time in 150 years, the night sky will rise with a simultaneous supermoon, blood moon, blue moon, and a lunar eclipse. But wait, it also happens to overlap with the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat, which is the Hebrew New Year for trees. It looks like we have a little too much to celebrate on our hands. All right, let's break that all down. So a blue moon isn't crazy rare all on its own. It's the extra full moon that occurs during an ordinary calendar month that happens every 2 or 3 years. The moon eclipse, however, is a bit rarer. If you're in the United States, your best bet is to catch it before sunrise on Wednesday morning, but those of us here in Israel will have a better look during the moonrise. Here's the thing though, the lunar eclipse will also give us a blood moon, which is when sunlight travels around the moon and into the atmosphere, making the moon look creepily, bloodily red. Not to freak you out, but blood moons play a special role in marking the apocalypse for some Christian believers. Though so far, the world seems to be okay, more or less. But this entire lunar event will look even more spectacular to the naked eye, because Wednesday is also a supermoon. That's when the moon happens to approach just a bit closer to the Earth than usual, around the time of a full moon, making it look even bigger on the horizon than normal. And the fact that this happens right on the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat, which is a lunar holiday used to mark when you can eat fruit from a tree, makes this literally a once-in-a-lifetime event. The last time we had all 5 at once was way back in 1866. Looks like our editor got some Sailor Moon in there. All right, now in time for our Hebrew word of the day. We're neither confirming or denying if an athletic app might have leaked some secret Israeli intel, but either way, our word today is sodi, which means shh, That's classified. Top secret or Sodi information is the elephant in just about every room here in Israel. That's because almost every Israeli has served in the I.D.F, meaning at some point they probably had to deal with Sodi intel. You'll actually hear the line, "Oh, I can't talk about that, it's Sodi," so much here that it gets kind of normal after a while. But it's not Sodi. That the word Sodi comes from the Hebrew word for secret, which is just Sod. Now, don't tell anyone I told you that. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy to cloudy with local showers in the north and center and a low of about 48 or 9 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect partly cloudy skies and a rise in temperatures to a high of roughly 65 or 18 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.4 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.